Imagine waking up one day realizing you've spent your whole life running from your deepest fear, only to discover it's been chasing you towards something extraordinary all along. In this video, we explore a powerful truth hidden beneath the surface of life's toughest moments, the fear of death, and the journey toward true fulfillment. We'll uncover how embracing vulnerability, taking control of your life story, and finding purpose can transform fear into strength. Whether you're stuck in the grind, navigating life's chaos, or just searching for that missing piece, this story is for you. But here's the catch. The real magic happens at the end, where you'll see exactly how these lessons come together to change everything. If you're ready to stop running and start truly living, watch until the very end. And don't forget, hit subscribe now to support the channel and get more scripts that speak directly to your life and your journey. Fear of death is an experience that, at one point or another, taps each of us on the shoulder. It emerges sometimes in our quiet reflections, our anxious moments, or our encounters with life's fragility. The question arises, can we be less afraid of death? Or perhaps more precisely, can we learn to stand more confidently in the face of our inevitable mortal boundary? A helpful way to approach this question is to reflect on the notion of living thoroughly, embracing a life so full and richly experienced that one can stand before mortality without overwhelming regret. In a candid discussion, a speaker recalls a conversation with his father, who has reached an advanced age, asking him if, hypothetically, he would want to return to his youth armed with the knowledge of age and wisdom. Surprisingly, the answer was uncertain. There was no immediate yes and no definite no. Such ambivalence highlights an important reality. Perhaps part of our evolution through life is coming to accept its natural progression. Having gone through the stages of parenting, marriage, professional development, and community building, one may sense that the fullness of these experiences cannot, and maybe should not, be duplicated. In other words, a life thoroughly lived might soften the edges of our fear of death. Yet this perspective does not necessarily negate the awareness of death's presence. Even the best-lived life can include moments of doubt, anxiety, or introspection about how quickly things can end. Still, taking full advantage of our talents, confronting challenges honestly, and saying yes to what resonates with our values can diminish death's sting by underscoring how well, or at least how deeply, we have engaged with our finite allotment of years. Some individuals, especially those living under the weight of debilitating illness or adverse circumstances, might find this vision of fully embracing life a challenge. However, for the majority, those who possess a modicum of health and opportunity, the call to step forward and pursue their potential stands out as a kind of moral imperative, both personally uplifting and socially beneficial. By examining everyday life transitions, making new friendships, pursuing meaningful careers, or simply contributing to family and community life, one can see how deep engagement fosters a sense of meaning that counters the existential dread of ending. Rather than confining ourselves to the safety of small living, leaning into a breadth of experiences might cultivate an inner acceptance that life, while inevitably terminating, carries genuine value that transcends the fear of its finale. It is useful to remember that these insights often come by surprise. 10 years ago, the individual reflecting on mortality might have wanted nothing more than an extension of life for as long as scientifically possible. But the passage of time and accumulation of experiences, both joyous and painful, can paradoxically create a sense that there are natural endpoints. We might come to feel that existence could be complete in a way. This is not to say we rush eagerly into oblivion, but rather we become aware that unending life may not be necessary to achieve lasting meaning. In many respects, that realization can shift our gaze toward living with clear purpose, doing what we can to contribute, and finding value in everyday acts. By embracing a stance of curious engagement in life's richness, we reduce the paralyzing hold that deathly anxieties might otherwise exert. It is perhaps the most honest, if subtle, remedy we have. Another dimension of navigating life's trials arises when fame or public attention enters the picture. Fame presents a set of unique and potent challenges, often centering around the risk of an individual becoming a parody or impersonation of themselves. Take, for example, a legendary musician like Elvis Presley. Early in his career, he was an innovative sensation who reshaped popular music. Yet by the time of his untimely death, his larger-than-life public persona had overshadowed whatever personal introspection he might have had. Many observed how he gradually became an Elvis impersonator, a spectacle bound to the external expectations of who Elvis was supposed to be. In contemporary intellectual circles, especially when significant public acclaim is involved, there is a parallel danger. A widely recognized writer or thinker may find themselves in an echo chamber, surrounded by people who nod in unison and rarely offer genuine critique. This can happen even to those who wish to maintain humility and earnestness. Admirers might be reluctant to voice constructive criticism, or they might fear being cast out from the orbit of fame. Consequently, the famous individual loses a critical element of checks and balances that sharpens perspective. Over time, it can become exponentially more difficult to stay authentic and grounded. Worse still, when one's circle is exclusively composed of yes-men or people who uncritically defer, it narrows the range of intellectual inquiry. Genuine development of ideas requires friction, debate, and a willingness to be wrong. This is especially apparent for those on the public stage who habitually wrestle with complex issues: political philosophy, psychology, moral reasoning, social analysis. Without robust challenges, the public figure may begin to sustain a distorted self-image. If you're never told you've gone too far, you're unlikely to reflect critically on your attitudes or statements. This stunted feedback loop can produce a brand of tyrannical certitude, eventually alienating the very audience whose trust or respect was initially gained. Fame also correlates with greater responsibility. The more influential a person becomes, the more meticulously they must address new issues or controversies that emerge within their purview. A statement that might once have reached a small circle of listeners or readers can now impact thousands, perhaps millions of individuals. Consequently, a single ill-considered remark might do real harm, propagating misunderstandings or fueling divisive sentiment. This is one reason many well-known individuals highlight the importance of maintaining a team of strong critics or advisors, people who keep you intellectually honest and challenge your assumptions. There is a type of moral courage in inviting dissent within one's inner circle. Such interplay helps mitigate the creeping arrogance or self-righteousness that can accompany widespread applause. Nevertheless, it is equally important to manage how one's emotional state is harnessed during public discourse, especially when delving into potentially incendiary topics. Anger can at times function as a motivator to address stark injustices, such as oppressive policy or blatant corruption. Yet anger must be handled judiciously. Should one rely too heavily on outrage, it can distort clarity of thought and overshadow the nuanced elements of more rational analysis. In delicate but profound ways, unbridled anger precludes the ability to see faint glimmers of compromise, reconciliation, or beauty in a given situation. Ultimately, even amidst the impetus to speak out passionately, the capacity to combine courage with humility and circumspection remains paramount. That balanced stance might well be the difference between forging constructive dialogue and simply fueling rancor. Life, inherently unpredictable, is woven with suffering. We grapple with personal losses, tragedies, and disappointments. Some people find themselves weighed down by professional demands, relationship issues, and existential uncertainties, all while trying to keep afloat financially and emotionally. Confronting the potential for devastation can be overwhelming. The speaker in this script points out that it is not so much a question of eliminating fear of death or disaster, but learning to orient oneself in a way that acknowledges a horizon of possibility. This horizon spans from personal ambition to literal global concerns. In discussing serious worldwide issues, the conversation shifts to the example of a looming famine. Investigating such severe topics can become a genuine psychological burden, precisely because the consequences, human suffering, resource scarcity, disruptions in global stability are so immense. The mind naturally recoils at the possibility of these large-scale calamities. Nevertheless, awareness spurs an ethical duty to speak, to write, and to alert others, even at the cost of personal comfort. As the speaker notes, one might easily choose to avoid these challenges, retreating to a peaceful lakeside cabin, watching the sunset, and enjoying personal tranquility. But the conscience may demand deeper engagement with problems whose scope extends beyond private well-being. Yet there's a great tension in addressing enormous threats such as famine, ecological crises, or social upheaval. On one hand, an individual could summon the energy of righteous anger to jolt others from complacency and galvanize collective action. On the other hand, unbridled anger can bleed into hostility, alienating those who might otherwise be part of the solution. Managing that delicate balance between passion and reason becomes an ongoing challenge for leaders, intellectuals, and advocates alike. Additionally, anger can constrict one's viewpoint, blocking out subtler or more hopeful elements in a dire situation. There is a nuanced blend of sincerity, urgency, caution, and optimism at work when a well-intentioned figure warns about potential catastrophes. They can neither underplay the gravity of the matter nor lapse into purely doomful rhetoric that undermines possibilities for adaptation and innovation. The question of cynicism also arises, especially when confronting seemingly insurmountable problems. It is tempting to regard the broader world with resentment and negativity, especially if efforts to warn others prove frustrating or go unheeded. Drawing from ideas of the 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, some caution that when an individual battles monsters, they risk becoming monstrous themselves. That is to say, fixating exclusively on the evil and calamitous aspects of life can warp the lens through which we see the world. The speaker's counsel is both sobering and hopeful. If you look deeply into the abyss, an image symbolizing the sum of tragedy and potential human darkness, you might also catch a glimpse of light. Indeed, persistence in facing harsh realities does not doom one inevitably to despair. It can awaken a deeper consciousness that affirms the good we are capable of cultivating even in the thick of adversity. Ultimately, a stance of readiness to grapple with the serious and terrible things that might or do happen does not eradicate one's capacity to appreciate beauty or to recognize moments of shared humanity. This approach resonates with the Judeo-Christian narrative of Christ, where acceptance of profound suffering, embodied in the crucifixion, transforms not into absolute defeat, but rather resurrection and redemption. In a psychological sense, acknowledging darkness can serve as a threshold to a renewed appreciation of life, provided one is willing to pass through it, not remain trapped by it. Standing consistently at this juncture between awareness of suffering and recognition of potential redemption may be one of life's central moral and existential tasks. Reflecting further, one might ask, how often do we consciously remind ourselves of death's constant shadow? For some deep thinkers, it is an ever-present companion, functioning almost as a motivational angel of death perched nearby, whispering that time is short. Waking each morning with the recognition that life is finite can compel a person to seize the day with increased fervor. Reminiscent of the Latin phrase carpe diem, it can become a routine mental practice. Time is short, so let's get moving. At first, this daily confrontation with mortality may sound daunting or emotionally draining. However, it can sharpen one's existential perspective. Instead of drifting, it means living with acute awareness that the tasks and goals at hand cannot be perpetually postponed without consequence. Those who maintain this orientation might display immense productivity, resilience, and concentrated effort. For them, the intangible angel of death serves as a consistent reminder that the clock is ticking, stripping away the luxury of idle procrastination. The speaker in the text, who has been through life-threatening health episodes, understands this intimately. There is a heightened intensity to every undertaking when you sense your capacity or even your life could be curtailed more abruptly than you once believed. Yet an unrelenting focus on death can also tempt individuals into nihilistic or pessimistic attitudes. Philosophers through the ages, from Blaise Pascal to Martin Heidegger, have remarked on how the awareness of one's mortality can breed either a paralyzing fear or a deeper sense of meaning. The direction one leans depends largely on the conceptual framework they adopt. If the awareness of mortality is integrated into a broader vision of purpose, such as the creative impulse, love for family, service to society, or spiritual commitment, this awareness becomes constructive. Conversely, if it stands alone as an isolated fixation, the result can be haunting hopelessness. The nuance lies in how we incorporate the knowledge of our finite span. In certain public discussions, influential figures like Elon Musk have offhandedly expressed a kind of weariness with life's continual burdens, with remarks like, "Death would be a relief." These momentary declarations highlight the psychological toll of ongoing demands, relentless accountability, and the knowledge that each day's responsibilities can feel heavier than the last. Celebrity, whether in entertainment, politics, or science-driven innovation, does not necessarily shield individuals from feeling that the load on their shoulders is immense. Instead, it can magnify it. One constructive insight is noticing that suffering often imparts critical lessons about how much one can endure or what resources of resilience dwell within. People who find a worthy purpose discover that suffering, while painful and disorienting, can be reframed as a catalyst for growth. These individuals accept that life's difficulties, illness, professional setbacks, personal loss, need not merely be obstacles, they become crucibles for transformation. This approach does not trivialize the reality of despair or the injustice of certain struggles, particularly those inflicted by sheer misfortune. Instead, it acknowledges that humans are paradoxically wired to cope, to continue, and often to flourish in surprising ways, even if part of the impetus for that flourishing is a direct confrontation with mortality. Thus, holding death nearby in one's daily awareness becomes less like a dark cloud and more like a consistent call to live now and live fully, forging meaning in each domain life has to offer. Turning from personal mortality to a different axis of concern, the dialogue addresses the relationship between vision, planning, and meaning, particularly in the context of personal development programs like the Future Authoring course. This program suggests that individuals often fail to move forward, not due to a lack of ability, but because they are uncertain why they are pursuing a given goal. If the vision is clouded, or if one has no vision at all, the obstacles to achievement can become insurmountable. For instance, going to college may be a well-trodden path, but it requires a significant energy investment, attending classes, reading textbooks, taking exams, and sacrificing leisure. Without clarity of purpose, any challenge can easily become an excuse to quit. People from difficult backgrounds who do not have a blueprint for what a fulfilling career or a stable family looks like are especially prone to such discouragement. Conversely, if they craft a compelling vision that resonates with their values and aspirations, their persistence in the face of adversity increases notably. Research data often show that when students complete a 90-minute exercise articulating their future goals and how they connect to deeper motivations, they are significantly more likely to persist through their first year of college and avoid academic derailment. The key message is that having a reason for action is integral to psychological and practical resilience. Without a reason, the natural friction of life, financial strain, interpersonal conflict, even exhaustion, becomes strong enough to stop forward movement. On the other hand, a clearly defined sense of purpose acts as emotional fuel, allowing people to navigate tumultuous environments with a certain steadiness. Beyond pragmatic benefits, a well-thought-out personal vision helps to prevent or mitigate bitterness and resentment, which often arise when one feels aimless or powerless. Moreover, crafting a vision involves situating one's future self across multiple domains: career, education, personal relationships, friendships, community engagement, and health. Even mental health strategies are woven into that planning because life's storms are inevitable. A nuanced plan does not claim that storms will not come. Rather, it equips the individual with a life raft to navigate them. In a therapeutic context, when someone struggles with depression or a sense of pointlessness, clinicians often inquire first about the patient's lifestyle. Do they have any close friends? Do they enjoy satisfying work? Are they maintaining reasonable physical health? Often, the root cause of their despair is traceable to an entire cluster of neglected priorities. Addressing them may not magically fix everything, but it can substantially lighten the psychological load. The future authoring framework thus underscores the idea that meaning is not merely a philosophical construct, it has practical dimensions. People who feel stagnant can be guided to ask, what would be an ideal outcome for my future relationships, career path, or community role? Identifying these targets helps them aim more accurately. Not aiming at all practically guarantees perpetual drifting, and while drifting might feel comfortable temporarily, it rarely ends well. Absent a sense of direction, individuals risk sinking into frustration, envy, or self-pity, destructive emotions that corrode well-being and hamper growth. In essence, the future authoring method illuminates how organizing one's life around internalized, carefully considered goals can propel development in profound ways, safeguarding against the temptation to surrender to resignation or nihilism. One fascinating element that arises when we consider this framework of intentional living and vision setting is the significance of relationships. An individual's sense of purpose is often intertwined with their bonds to family, friends, and romantic partners. A life fully lived, the speaker suggests, includes forging meaningful connections and bearing certain responsibilities. Having children, managing one's household, caring for parents as they age, maintaining friendships, and working in a field that not only provides financial support, but also nurtures personal strengths. It is a common misconception that focusing on these responsibilities confines a person to a burdensome routine. Yet in reality, these responsibilities can serve as essential pillars of meaning. They broaden our sense of purpose beyond the self. For instance, the radical difference in experience between leading a solitary hedonic lifestyle and devoting oneself to raising a child can be staggering. The child demands resources, time, attention, emotional labor, yet also confers a sense of existential weight that can instill deeper reason to stay healthy, productive, and engaged with the world. In the same way, a career that aligns with one's personal skill set, ambition, or moral ideals provides structure and context, ensuring we are continually challenged and thus able to grow. Beyond these personal dimensions, the speaker highlights another layer, a civic responsibility that can bolster a sense of contribution. Active participation in community life, whether through volunteering, local governance, charity work, or mentorship, forms a direct link to something larger than the individual, Such endeavors weave a person into the social fabric of a community, fostering a sense of belonging and reinforcing the message that our actions matter. Why emphasize this civic element? In part, it is an antidote to the corrosive effects of isolation. People adrift, untethered to meaningful social roles, often find themselves mired in bitterness and cynicism. By contrast, giving time and effort to a cause, local or global, can rekindle hope. It serves as a counterbalance to the tragedies and injustices we inevitably witness or experience. The capacity to contribute, even modestly, to ameliorate some dimension of life, for ourselves and for others, is a crucial aspect of well-being, and should one find themselves in dire straits, health crises, losses, or financial pitfalls, the sense of duty and service, strange though it may sound, can keep a person anchored, preventing a slide into total despair. In sum, forging a purposeful existence involves acting on multiple levels: personal relationships, professional endeavors, and community engagement. Yet none of this is to sugarcoat the reality of adversity. Undoubtedly, some face challenges so enormous that even the best-laid plans can feel insufficient. However, the call to articulate a vision and develop strategies resonates more powerfully when life's storms rage. It is the mental map that reminds us why we must keep going. Responsibility, in this conception, is not just an external demand, it is the bridge between ourselves and the rest of existence, through which we find a sense of meaning and resilience. A deeper inquiry emerges. What exactly is the highest goal we should be aiming for? Or, in more colloquial terms, what am I supposed to do with my life? The conversation weaves in reflections from a variety of sources, including classical philosophy and modern therapy, to highlight that we each possess the capacity for heroism. This heroism, in a psychological sense, is not reserved for mythical figures who slay dragons, but also for those who steadfastly face their personal challenges in a manner that benefits themselves and those around them. We can observe that in many mythological or religious narratives, the hero's journey consists of voluntarily facing the unknown. In older human societies, this might have been the literal unknown of forests, beasts, or enemy territories. In our current world, it can be the unknown of a new career path, a foreign culture, an intellectual frontier, or the emotional territory of loving relationships. By confronting rather than fleeing, we test and transform ourselves. This is reminiscent of old stories. In confronting a fearsome dragon, the hero not only secures treasure for the community, but also grows in wisdom and fortitude. However, modern dragons are not necessarily the fire-breathing beasts of fairy tales. They can be formidable social and personal struggles: addiction, debt, interpersonal conflict, mental illness, or the more abstract fears of climate change and geopolitical tension. Still, the storyline retains its essence. The symbolic gold you retrieve is a deeper sense of competence, self-respect, and often communal benefit. For example, a man or woman wrestling with addiction who succeeds in recovery often becomes a beacon of hope and a mentor to others facing similar battles. In doing so, they epitomize heroism, albeit of a personal or social kind. These narratives highlight what many psychologists note. We look up to admirable individuals to see the embodiment of traits we ourselves aspire to cultivate. The speaker invokes the image of looking up as though the paragon of virtue stands on higher ground, urging us upward. This is neither trivial nor arbitrary. Observing persons of admirable character helps define our own moral compasses: what we value, what we detest, what we hope to become. But this process can also awaken feelings of inadequacy or envy if we compare ourselves unfavorably, leading some to tear down these exemplars. The healthier, if more challenging route, is to recognize that these moral and practical ideals direct us toward growth. Hence, engaging with heroic or model figures, be they historical leaders, a wise parent, or a community teacher, reinforces the central premise that we can keep striving toward a higher standard of being. This incremental, effort-based evolution pushes us away from resentful stagnation and toward a constructive mode of living. It is arguably why stories from the Marvel Universe or other mainstream cultural phenomena such as the Top Gun reboot resonate so strongly. When a narrative emphasizes courage, loyalty, and self-sacrifice, it taps into an archetypal pattern that is deeply embedded in the human psyche. Audiences gravitate to characters who face moral tests and surmount them, reaffirming that, despite our frailties, there exists within us a wellspring of potential for positive transformation. Herein lies a crucial insight. While virtue can be taught, it is also practiced. We sharpen our moral sensibilities through action, guided by the narratives, mentors, or community members we admire. In the process, life becomes less about short-term gratification and more about fulfilling a larger purpose, whether that purpose is found in nurturing children, excelling in one's field, or contributing civic service. When adversity inevitably arises, we lean on the confidence derived from knowing that our ambitions rest on strong foundational virtues. If a single theme undergirds this perspective, it is that striving upward, toward the best we can conceive, provides not only meaning, but also the resilience to face hardships with dignity. Stepping further into this exploration, let us consider the concept of transformation from a psychological standpoint. Human beings, by nature, constantly adapt to new environments, challenges, and hierarchies. Our distant primate relatives, like chimpanzees, exhibit social dominant structures in which the alpha male enforces his status largely through intimidation and physical prowess. However, in humans, social organization has evolved a more intricate structure. We don't merely rely on brute force or intimidation. We have layered systems of respect, cooperation, and reciprocal exchange. These systems help determine who ascends as a leader or role model in any given domain, be it academia, business, or community leadership. Our evolutionary biology and our cultural narratives have dovetailed over millennia in such a way that we not only notice who rises to the top, but also tell stories about them, myths, legends, or modern success stories. Invariably, these stories capture desirable traits or virtues. Thus, from a genetic and cultural standpoint, we have developed to admire and emulate individuals who embody honorable characteristics such as bravery, generosity, fairness, competence, and truthfulness. When societies function optimally, this elevation of the virtuous can be self-reinforcing, encouraging the next generation to cultivate similar virtues. In that sense, leadership hierarchies aren't just about raw competition for resources. They're also about modeling how the best among us behave under stress, adversity, and responsibility. Female choice, another cornerstone of evolutionary theory, further shapes this dynamic. Humans differ significantly from chimpanzees in that human females actively select mates, often based on a combination of social, psychological, and physical cues that extend beyond raw dominance. In ancestral environments, and arguably still today, the men able to cooperate productively, protect effectively, and show kindness to offspring would be more likely to pass on their genes. Over time, cultures recognized that traits beneficial for child-rearing and group cohesion were just as crucial as the capacity for defense. This interplay likely contributed to our complex moral frameworks, which reward not only physical prowess but also empathy, skillful negotiation, and emotional intelligence. When one wonders, who should I become, they might be unconsciously referencing this deeply ingrained template that society and biology have cooperated to instill over countless generations. We could say the entire Western narrative of the individual owes its shape, in part, to these evolutionary forces. The notion of climbing a dominance hierarchy then becomes a metaphorical expression for the refinement of personal traits, aiming to do better, be better, and contribute more. Where chimpanzee dominance might rely on intimidation or aggression, human excellence more often integrates moral and intellectual strengths. One could extrapolate from this that developing character isn't simply a matter of personal preference or convenience. It's also grounded in thousands of years of evolutionary and cultural impetus. This helps explain why stories of the best possible person or the heroic ideal are so appealing and so persistent. Whether it's a religious figure like Christ in a Christian context or a modern superhero in a cinematic universe, we respond to the portrayal of ultimate virtue as if it is both exhilarating and somehow intimately familiar. It resonates with fundamental patterns that lie just beneath conscious awareness, reminding us of what we might become if we strive appropriately. Rather than viewing this as some abstract or unattainable model, we might remember that every individual has the seeds of such virtue, waiting for the sunlight of deliberate action and the water of consistent practice to foster its growth. If heroism in a grand sense remains elusive, we can bring it down to a daily scale. Being a person of good character often starts with basic, habitual behaviors. Arriving on time, honoring commitments, recognizing the needs of others and acting in ways that support them. The discourse references a SEAL ethos as described by Congressman Dan Crenshaw, emphasizing qualities such as personal accountability, attention to detail, perseverance, and leadership that arises organically, rather than from an imposed hierarchy. These principles have broad applicability. While they might ring especially true in a military context, they speak to universal virtues: reliability, courage, creativity, humility, and the capacity to handle adversity. This ethos resonates with Aristotelian thinking. We are what we repeatedly do. If we practice reliability, generosity, and kindness in small ways, these actions aggregate over time into robust features of our character. Conversely, practicing deceit, laziness, or cruelty in incremental steps also shapes an undesirable identity. Setting out to become the best person we can be can thus be reframed as consistently building beneficial habits. People become heroes in small, often unnoticed ways before they face more dramatic moments of crisis or responsibility. One remarkable point is that personal growth often occurs in direct proportion to the challenges we choose to shoulder. A trivial pursuit might yield minimal frustration and equally minimal development. Meanwhile, an ambitious goal, like becoming a surgeon, starting a company, or transforming local governance, demands intense perseverance, forcing the development of new skills, emotional maturity, and innovative thinking. The friction of complexity fosters sharper tools, so to speak. Moreover, within such pursuits, the synergy between one's personal drive and the needs of the larger community emerges powerfully. It is in those spaces that deep meaning typically crystallizes. Critics of heroic narratives sometimes dismiss them as myths that distract from pressing social concerns, or as illusions fueling a naive bootstrap mentality. However, it is possible to interpret these narratives as reminders of innate human potential. They need not deny real socioeconomic or structural obstacles. Rather, they highlight that even amid such constraints, the human spirit has historically found ways to innovate, challenge injustice, and push beyond perceived limitations. Indeed, there is a reason that rags to riches stories or underdog sports films continue to inspire. They echo the possibility that an ordinary individual or group can transcend a dire starting point through determination and moral resolve. The discussion also contends with the temptation of resentment. When we see figures who are successful or even heroic, we might be drawn to rationalize away their achievements by attributing them solely to luck or privilege. While it is true that fortune and opportunity play roles in every life, fixating solely on these external factors robs us of a more nuanced understanding. Many successful, socially contributive individuals overcame personal adversities, learned from failure, and took the leap of responsibility. If we reflexively discount others' accomplishments, we cut ourselves off from the benefits of modeling and from the possibility that we, too, can ascend. In effect, the notion of self-improvement, whether in a gritty Navy SEAL environment or a corporate setting, points back to daily discipline. You cannot simply wait for a moment of greatness to prove yourself. You must repeatedly test and cultivate your virtues in everyday circumstances. Over time, this repeated discipline translates into what might look like heroism or remarkable competency to an outside observer. In short, modest actions practiced consistently pave the way for extraordinary results. A related component to these heroic or virtuous traits is the pursuit of truth, which appears throughout many of the world's moral and spiritual traditions. Truth, in its various forms, accuracy, honesty, sincerity, serves as a foundation for trust, cooperation, and discovery. A society that scorns truth soon becomes corrupt, and individuals who habitually lie dismantle their own mental stability. The original conversation touches on how telling the truth is a cornerstone trait that people intuitively value. If leadership is predicated on trust, then lying or misleading those who look to you for guidance undermines the entire edifice of respect and loyalty that leaders rely upon. Beyond the social domain, truthfulness impacts self-perception and internal coherence. Repeatedly lying, even in trivial matters, introduces a wedge between one's actions and one's conscience. This dissonance can foster anxiety, depression, or even cynicism, as the liar must perpetually guard the falsehoods. On a grander scale, widespread deception across political or media institutions can generate deep public mistrust, breeding conspiracy and social fragmentation. By contrast, courageous truth-telling, although challenging, builds credibility and fosters a climate in which honest dialogue can flourish. In the personal sphere, it preserves mental wholeness. Yet upholding truth does not equate to adopting a self-righteous or harshly judgmental stance. Discernment must be paired with compassion and humility, recognizing that each of us inhabits limited perspectives. The speaker's commentary on calling out behaviors, say criticizing individuals or groups for misguided environmental policies, suggests that righteous anger can appear valid. However, when anger or condemnation overshadows empathy and willingness to find common ground, even truth can be weaponized destructively. Balancing forthright speech with a measure of grace allows the messenger to remain open to nuance. Leaders, thinkers, and activists are thus admonished to temper their zeal for truth with an appreciation for the complexity of human affairs. Consider the environmental debate on issues like climate change, agriculture, and land use. If one's aim is to highlight the plight of farmers endangered by misguided regulations, it may become necessary to raise the alarm with intensity. But if that same passion devolves into personal attacks and demonization of entire groups, potential allies may be alienated. The messenger's truth-telling, originally well-intentioned, can morph into an indiscriminate wave of hostility. That is why cultivating an internal sense of balance is paramount, to remain fierce in principle while flexible in approach. In daily life, truth-seeking can be practiced in simpler interactions as well, giving honest feedback to a friend, correcting an unfair assumption, or taking responsibility rather than excusing our faults. These might seem like modest acts, but cumulatively, they reinforce an internal identity of integrity. They also encourage others to do the same, as consistent truthfulness is often met with reciprocal honesty. In that light, a culture of truth can proliferate from the micro level outward. Overall, truth is not merely an abstract ideal. It intersects with multiple domains: political, economic, interpersonal, scientific, and shapes how societies cohere. When joined with virtues such as kindness and courage, a strong dedication to truth-telling often marks the difference between a dysfunctional environment and one capable of resilience. And if living fully involves clarifying and pursuing a vision for the future, truth is one indispensable tool for ensuring that vision aligns with reality rather than wishful fantasy. Moving on, we encounter the notion that anyone lacking a plan might soon find themselves caught in what is metaphorically described as sin, or missing the mark. Classical definitions of sin often revolve around moral or spiritual deviation, but another way to see it is simply veering off a constructive path. This can happen if we fail to set purposeful targets for ourselves, making it more likely that we drift into states of chaos or mindless indulgence. We might resort to short-term fixes, overindulgence in food, alcohol, or procrastination, to fill the void created by a lack of aspirational direction. This perspective underscores the link between moral or philosophical concepts and basic goal-oriented psychology. If we do not aim at something worthwhile, it becomes exceedingly easy to succumb to impulsiveness, to rationalize laziness, or to blame external factors for our stagnation. From a therapeutic standpoint, identifying a purposeful aim is frequently the first step in reclaiming personal agency. In a sense, we must ask ourselves, where is the target? And if it appears faint or distant, how do we clarify it so we can take more precise aim? These issues resonate with broader challenges in contemporary society. Entertainment and digital media supply endless distractions that can keep us numbed, glued to streaming services, social platforms, or trivial content that momentarily soothes but rarely enriches. While leisure and relaxation are valuable in moderate doses, they can easily spiral into avoidance behaviors. For instance, a young adult uncertain about their professional future may find themselves binge-watching shows or scrolling through social feeds for hours on end, effectively postponing serious engagement with real-life planning. Anxiety often dwells beneath such avoidance. Setting a goal means accepting the risk of failure. It also means we must confront our current limitations. Yet the trade-off is that life acquires immediate direction and impetus. Without that impetus, suffering becomes less tolerable. The existential weight of having no reason to endure hardship can lead to mental distress. By contrast, the burden of discipline or effort becomes more manageable, even meaningful, when anchored in a vision of future attainment or contribution. Moreover, having a plan opens the door to positive emotions, such as excitement, hope, and curiosity. These emotions primarily arise when we perceive ourselves to be moving toward something of value. They energize us, providing mental resilience against the setbacks that accompany any worthwhile endeavor. If we have no overarching aim, the emotional rewards of making progress never materialize, leaving us with little to buffer the inevitable storms of existence. From an ethical stance, adopting personal goals also benefits the collective. An individual with a sense of responsibility to become, say, a reliable doctor or a fair-minded manager eventually contributes to social welfare by providing skilled services or ethical leadership. On the flip side, those who evade accountability or remain chronically adrift may unwittingly become social burdens, requiring rescue by family, friends, or state mechanisms. In this sense, there is a moral dimension to self-improvement. As we build ourselves up, we lessen the load on others and even find ways to uplift them in turn. Hence, failing to aim not only leaves the self in a precarious position, it also ripples outward, affecting the community's overall stability and morale. In the context of clinical practice, one particularly powerful aspect is observing the transformation of clients who become consciously goal-oriented. It's noted that many individuals, upon first entering therapy, may struggle with a sense of disorder or helplessness, unsure why they are depressed or anxious. They might attribute these feelings solely to chemical imbalances or difficult childhoods, but often, lack of direction and structure plays a significant role. When they begin constructing a vision for their future, writing down specific aspirations for career, relationships, health, or creative pursuits, something profound shifts. Their perspective on obstacles morphs from an immovable roadblock into a challenge they are willing to tackle. This does not deny the reality that some people face extraordinarily harsh conditions or have ongoing health problems that significantly limit their options. But for a majority, there remains a surprising capacity for rapid improvement once they realign their efforts. A person who has no awareness of the job market or is consumed by fear at the idea of an interview can be guided to learn practical skills, crafting a strong resume, practicing mock interviews, seeking relevant credentials. Bit by bit, as they achieve small wins, their confidence builds. Within a span of months or a few years, they might find themselves in positions, professionally and psychologically, far exceeding what they initially believed possible. What makes this process enchanting is the realization that everyone has a part to play in co-authoring their lives. While our genetic dispositions, family backgrounds, and societal contexts shape certain initial conditions, we retain the agency to steer ourselves along new pathways. Through structured goal setting, supportive relationships, and continuous learning, we gradually fortify our resilience against life's vicissitudes. And when a person experiences tangible improvement, whether financially, socially, or emotionally, they often discover a sense of gratitude that further fuels their journey. It is a self-reinforcing feedback loop. Small success leads to confidence, which paves the way for bigger goals. This dynamic interplay lies at the heart of many therapeutic techniques rooted in cognitive behavioral principles. Identify negative thinking patterns, replace them with actionable goals, and measure incremental progress. Although no single method works for everyone, the vital takeaway is that establishing a future-oriented perspective helps mitigate despair and aimlessness. In sum, the climb from confusion to clarity is frequently less about innate talent or intelligence and more about consistent reorientation toward a meaningful target. The conversation then touches on another fundamental dimension, recognizing the worst possible outcomes. This imaginative exercise entails envisioning the darkest paths we could tread if we indulge our bad habits or unscrupulous traits. Much as the program invites people to picture a bright, successful future, it also urges them to envision the pit of chaos or despair that might materialize if they continually avoid responsibility. A powerful psychological effect can occur here. Once a person vividly imagines this worst version of themselves, a spark of motivation to evade that dire state ignites. Why is this approach effective? Because fear and aversion can be potent drivers of human behavior. We are motivated not only by the desire to gain rewards, but also by the wish to evade punishment or tragedy. By conjuring up the ramifications of irresponsibility, financial ruin, interpersonal conflict, declining health, or moral corruption, a person may see in stark detail the suffering that awaits if they remain passive. Seeing that possibility can galvanize them to take even small steps toward improvement. In a sense, they now have a demon to flee, as well as an angel to pursue. These mental exercises dovetail with mythological or religious stories wherein the hero is tested by their capacity for wrongdoing. For instance, the biblical story of Cain and Abel underscores how envy and resentment can spiral into catastrophic violence. Cain, embodying destructive emotions, robs himself of divine favor by murdering his brother. The moral is not strictly religious dogma, it is an archetypal warning about the path of bitterness. By recognizing our capacity for wrongdoing or malevolence, we gain a more realistic self-portraiture. If we remain naive to our own potential for dark behavior, we leave ourselves ill-prepared to prevent it. Moreover, confronting such possible darkness fosters humility. It's tempting to cast ourselves strictly as victims of circumstance, but honest introspection reveals that, in many cases, we collude with or create the conditions that trap us. That realization can hurt, but it also opens the door to moral and behavioral improvement. If each of us acknowledges, I could become a liar, a manipulator, or a destructive force if I let certain impulses reign unchecked, then we take responsibility for halting those impulses. The impetus to improve, ironically, gains momentum when we accept that sliding into an unworthy existence is entirely possible. In short, visualizing the personal apocalypse that can arise from poor choices has a protective function. It invests everyday decisions with meaning, each one potentially leading us either closer to that internal hell or further from it. Such moral clarity, while at times disquieting, can be the very impetus for transformation. Rather than drifting into malevolence by accident, we actively steer ourselves in better directions, partly because we have glimpsed the havoc we could otherwise wreak on ourselves and others. This line of reasoning carries over into collective challenges as well. Many of our cultural and political debates center on who identifies a dragon in the distance, be it environmental collapse, economic crisis, or social decay, and proclaims themselves the hero to solve it. But adopting the mantle of dragon slayer requires more than fear-based rhetoric. As emphasized earlier, fear may seize the public's attention, yet it often warps nuanced analysis. We must distinguish between legitimate warnings, like overfishing that endangers marine ecosystems or unsustainable agricultural practices, and those sensational calls to hysteria that hamper rational solutions. When we confront complex, large-scale issues, the question arises, who do we trust as a guide or leader? Much depends on whether they remain calm, principle-driven, and able to articulate practical, evidence-based paths forward, or whether they rely on doomsday pronouncements that narrow the conversation. We can also ask, do they value individual freedom and responsibility, or do they reflexively push for top-down decrees that erode local decision-making? Even earnest, well-intentioned individuals can become dangerously tyrannical if consumed by the anxiety of impending catastrophe, demanding all power to implement a single solution. Thus, an essential check on any hero archetype is the presence of humility, openness to feedback, and the refusal to treat dissenters as enemies. Simultaneously, a default stance of casual denial or dismissiveness is no more virtuous. If real threats loom and we wave them off without scrutiny, we neglect our duty to protect what we cherish, our families, communities, and nations. Therefore, the capacity to remain balanced, alert to dangers but not overwhelmed, resolute without absolutism, defines a wise approach. Observers such as Bjorn Lomborg, Marian Tupy, or Matt Ridley exemplify a style of engagement that acknowledges serious environmental and economic concerns, but also highlights human ingenuity and the possibilities for sustainable progress. Their arguments run counter to doomsday mania, suggesting we can innovate our way to solutions if we remain flexible, data-driven, and entrepreneurial. And the level of everyday life, the principle remains. Fear may clarify what is at stake, but it should not rule the entire discussion. By the same token, unyielding optimism that denies any problems can be naively reckless. A balanced approach harnesses both caution and confidence in human creativity, urging each of us to take individual responsibility for local improvements. After all, meaningful global change often arises from countless localized action. We need not all become grand dragon slayers on an epic scale. We can start by optimizing our immediate surroundings, our homes, workplaces, and communities. Taken together, these ideas form a conceptual cycle: strive toward excellence, remain truthful, carry a vision of a better future, appreciate one's own darker impulses, and engage with public challenges in a measured manner. Philosophically, it is an assertion that civilization itself is an achievement in perpetual need of maintenance and renewal. From the vantage point of the individual, it reiterates that each step in personal growth can, in aggregate, shift the tide on large-scale matter. That synergy between the personal and the collective stands at the heart of mature ethical systems, bridging the gap between personal ambition and shared prosperity. Expanding on the themes of self-improvement and social betterment, the discussion turns again to goal-directed frameworks and how they activate our neurological systems in ways that produce positive emotion. Neurologically, human beings appear wired to experience excitement and pleasure when they perceive progress toward a valued aim. If someone chooses a sufficiently challenging and meaningful target, each forward stride releases motivational resources. This phenomenon clarifies why a life devoid of discernible goals can slip into ennui. There is no impetus for the brain to generate that enlivening energy, and individuals can sink into feelings of meaninglessness. In the same breath, we recognize that aiming for the highest possible goal entails risks. Those who set their sights on grand visions, establishing a groundbreaking business or writing a transformative book or championing a social cause, must contend with potential failure, public scrutiny, and personal sacrifice. In the absence of a deep conviction, these obstacles can overwhelm, leading to abandonment of the quest. However, when the objective is chosen carefully, something deeply resonant with one's strengths and values, the momentum of partial successes, or even instructive failures, propels continued effort. It is an ongoing dialogue between aspiration and reality, with setbacks serving not as dead ends, but as prompts to refine strategies or deepen resolve. We see an example in the laborious process of writing a major work, like a substantial research text or a creative manuscript. Authors often grapple with rejections, grueling edits, self-doubt, or the monotony of daily drafting. Yet, the mental reward system doles out small but vital bursts of satisfaction each time a paragraph is mastered or an insightful idea emerges. Over time, these micro-rewards accumulate, culminating in a finished piece of writing that not only bestows personal pride but can also deliver value to a community of readers. In a broader sense, this micro-to-macro progression underscores how a grand aspiration, becoming an influential writer, remains feasible if broken down into smaller, manageable chunks aligned with a robust internal drive. This process also reaffirms the earlier notion that superficial hedonism, the pursuit of immediate, short-lived pleasures, cannot sustainably nourish the psychological system that thrives on incremental mastery and contribution. While pleasurable experiences might register as fleeting gains, they seldom build a sense of growth in competence or long-term significance. Absent that deeper sense of forward momentum, life can feel punishingly empty. In essence, discipline and commitment to a valued direction become crucial to reaping the mental and emotional benefits of goal pursuit. Such an understanding can inform how we coach youth or counsel those who have fallen into destructive habits. If they can shift their attention to a purposeful target, a skill set, a service-oriented project, an artistic endeavor, they might find that the structure of incremental progress awakens motivation. This shift often transforms them from a discouraged, directionless individual into someone animated by a new sense of possibility. Parents, mentors, and teachers can facilitate this by helping to identify authentic interests, setting modest initial goals, and celebrating small milestones. Over time, these steps develop into a robust scaffolding for success and self-esteem. An essential counterbalance to unbridled ambition is understanding personal limits, both physically and psychologically. Recognizing that not everyone should or even can work 80-hour weeks or operate comfortably under extreme pressure is a matter of respecting diverse temperaments and dispositions. Some people thrive in highly demanding environments, while others excel in roles that permit more reflective or creative pacing. Problems can emerge when society, or social media, glorifies a single type of excellence, implicitly demeaning all other forms of contribution. For instance, if intelligence is narrowly defined by standardized test scores, countless individuals with strong interpersonal skills or creative flair might feel overshadowed. Or if hustle culture elevates a 24/7 work ethic, those who value family time, leisure, or mental balance are at risk of labeling themselves as lazy. The original transcript alludes to how we each come equipped with unique biological and psychological inclinations. For example, conscientiousness, stress tolerance, or spontaneity. To ensure that personal development aligns with authentic well-being, it is advisable to identify domains in which our core traits can truly flourish. That said, discovering one's natural inclinations does not mean surrendering to them entirely. There is merit in pushing beyond comfort zones to gain new skills and expand personal boundaries, yet a measure of self-awareness remains vital. If you find yourself chronically stressed, depressed, or languishing in a role ill-suited to your nature, it might be time to adjust course. True success entails calibrating the demands of any given pursuit with your genuine capabilities and resilience levels. A balanced approach acknowledges that life's satisfaction arises neither from perpetual comfort nor from masochistic overextension, but rather from a sweet spot where challenges remain stimulating without shattering well-being. Moreover, teamwork and specialization allow us to harness diverse strengths. Not everyone must master every skill. People can coordinate within families, communities, or professional settings so that various tasks are handled by those most adept or enthusiastic about them. The modern workforce often prizes collaboration precisely because it recognizes the synergy that arises when individuals with complementary talents unite. In this sense, acknowledging personal limits is not a matter of low ambition. It is a realistic strategy for personal and collective advancement. From a spiritual or philosophical standpoint, it's often suggested that part of human wisdom is learning to differentiate the battles we are meant to fight from those beyond our scope. Myths and parables across cultures highlight how arrogance or delusions of grandeur can lead to downfall. Even as one aims high, the virtue of temperance, the measured approach guards against the pitfalls of turning a noble quest into a self-destructive crusade. If you aim for the top of a hierarchy that genuinely aligns with your virtues, that ascent can be fulfilling. But if the climb is driven by envy, fear of inferiority, or misguided attempts to match someone else's calling, the path may become rife with frustration or emptiness. So while the conversation champions the idea of a visionary life, it simultaneously stresses the importance of reflective equilibrium. Part of living thoroughly involves making peace with our finite potential, or deciding how best to deploy it. Life may be short, but the variety of ways to fill it with meaning is vast. Recognizing personal limitations, ironically, can free us to make the most of the gifts we do possess. Suffering appears again in this dialogue as both an unfortunate given and a potential catalyst for self-transcendence. Physical illnesses, betrayals, career failures, and the eventual decline of the body with age shape the terrain of the human experience. One function of a well-articulated sense of purpose is to neutralize or at least soften these inevitable pains. If a person has a stable family, rewarding work, and a sense that their efforts benefit others, hardship may be borne with a measure of grace. We see this principle at work in stories of individuals enduring harrowing ordeals, prisoners of war, concentration camp survivors, or refugees, who nonetheless cling to shards of meaning or love that sustain them. In a more ordinary context, someone might endure an unfulfilling job or a difficult phase of raising children if they keep in mind the future benefits or the intrinsic worth of the responsibility they shoulder. Stripped of that sense of the bigger picture, the same hardships might spiral into bitterness or despair. Indeed, cynicism typically blooms in the absence of a supportive worldview that frames daily toil as contributory to a larger goal. Conversely, the knowledge that it's worth it in the long run extends an emotional lifeline, pulling the individual toward resilience. This line of thought dovetails with the concept of self-sacrifice or service. As paradoxical as it sounds, the willingness to devote energy to causes beyond personal gain can end up fulfilling the individual at a deeper level. By seeing your efforts alleviate another's suffering or enhance collective prosperity, you bypass the narrow labyrinth of self-concern. In simpler terms, if you're feeling dreadful, helping someone else may lighten your load more than you expect. This is not about ignoring your problems, but transforming them into fuel for empathy and constructive action. However, those prone to perfectionism or martyr complexes must take care not to overextend to the point of personal collapse. Genuine self-sacrifice is distinct from pathological self-negation. The latter eventually erodes one's ability to contribute at all. A discerning balance ensures that giving remains sustainable, renewing itself over time. Ideally, we weave a reciprocal tapestry. We give some of our energy to others and also allow ourselves to receive help when it is offered. That synergy can foster communal bonds that buffer individual hardships. On a broader cultural scale, the combination of personal meaning and community service can produce the bedrock for civilization itself. People who feel connected to societal well-being, even if through small acts, are more inclined to behave responsibly. They are also less susceptible to succumbing to the lures of nihilism or radical destructiveness. Historically, many reform movements, from public education campaigns to philanthropic societies, blossomed from individuals who recognized both personal moral convictions and a broader social impetus to rectify injustices. It is that synergy again between personal growth and the communal good that underscores the brilliance of the vision plus responsibility model. Ultimately, whether we speak of the environmental or economic or personal realms, it is the consistent application of hope, accountability, and moral fortitude that yields progressive solutions. Each incremental improvement, each newly forged social bond, each vow to withstand adversity with dignity, cumulatively weaves the fabric of a more functional society. While no single person can remedy all ills, everyone can participate in remedying something. A pivotal insight for anyone who finds themselves paralyzed by the sheer scale of global or local crises. Within these contemplations of responsibility and community, we return to the fundamental question of freedom, particularly that tension between individual agency and social constraints. The ideal scenario is one in which each person seeks not only their own prosperity but also respects the autonomy of others, fosters dialogue, and encourages shared progress. In practice, collisions arise among divergent value systems, economic priorities, or cultural identities. The risk is that leaders or citizens react by clinging to rigid dogma or totalitarian instincts, imposing draconian solutions, Such responses can ironically transform a well-meaning quest into a tyranny. Reflecting on larger historical tragedies, we observe how societies that succumb to fear-based governance, be it under Stalinist regimes or authoritarian states, stifled both individual innovation and moral accountability. One lesson from these cautionary tales is that evil can masquerade as good intentions if it lacks transparency and accountability. On an individual scale, the same dynamic plays out. A person might firmly believe their worldview is the right one, and so feel justified in coercive tactics, failing to see how this attitude mirrors the authoritarian mindset they presumably oppose. We must ask ourselves whether the ends justify the means, or if the moral approach requires inherently ethical methods. In bridging personal and collective concerns, the conversation hints that the best solutions typically incorporate freedom, constructive debate, and a deep respect for the individual's capacity to choose. This goes back to the earlier notion that choice is central to the human experience. People who are forced into solutions rarely adopt them wholeheartedly. Conversely, those who voluntarily align with a vision, be it ethical, environmental, or social, are more likely to bring their creative energies and sense of personal responsibility to it. Thus, moral maturity involves balancing the passion to rectify injustices with the willingness to let others operate within their own spheres of autonomy. Indeed, tension arises in contemporary issues like addressing climate change or public health crises, where certain measures might appear to demand sweeping mandates. It is easy to see how fear can galvanize a push for immediate, one-size-fits-all directives. Even if the crisis is real, the approach can breed resentment, non-compliance, and even deeper social fractures. Hence, the conversation underscores a nuanced path. Do we trust in local knowledge, incremental progress, and voluntary contributions enough to channel large-scale cooperation without resorting to relentless force? Additionally, fostering a culture of empathy and open communication can significantly reduce the impetus for authoritarian responses. When people feel unheard or dismissed, they either revolt or withdraw into apathy. Whether it is a small family unit or a large democracy, a sense of shared purpose thrives when communication pathways remain transparent and respectful. Individuals can then commit to solutions because they see their place in the narrative, not because they are commanded to comply. Such an environment mirrors healthy parent-child relationships. Rational guidance, consistent expectations, and listening are more effective for long-term moral development than authoritarian decrees. In this sense, personal transformation and communal harmony are two sides of the same coin. Each citizen who cultivates self-awareness, responsibility, and truthfulness contributes to a broader social environment that prizes liberty, balanced by ethical constraints. No perfect equilibrium exists, but the alignment of personal growth with communal benefit remains a guiding ideal. Taking one final reflection on the inner life of the individual, consider the interplay between temperament, vision, and the heroic call. Each person's temperament might predispose them toward caution, boldness, extroversion, or introspection. For example, individuals high in openness and agreeableness may be drawn to altruistic or creative fields, while those high in conscientiousness might feel at home in structured, detail-oriented roles. Far from restricting choices, understanding one's temperament can clarify which heroic path resonates most strongly. Some heroes excel as trailblazers, daring to explore uncharted intellectual or geographical frontiers. Others function as diplomats, bridging communication among factions. Still others shine as caretakers, providing stability and nurture in familial or institutional frameworks. Regardless of which path a person embarks upon, the central elements, truth-seeking, responsible action, community contribution, and acceptance of suffering, remain consistent. Indeed, personal style can vary, but the deeper moral underpinnings do not. This uniform moral core is why we can identify heroism across diverse contexts: the dedicated nurse in an understaffed hospital, the volunteer working with vulnerable populations, the entrepreneur who creates jobs in a struggling community. In each scenario, the principle of self-transcendence, doing more than is merely convenient for the self, sparkles. This vantage point also alleviates the temptation to compare ourselves unfavorably with those who appear more dramatic in their undertakings. Not everyone is meant to be a household name or command armies of admirers. Many forms of greatness flourish beyond the limelight. Indeed, the ancient Greek philosophers often posited that authentic virtue might be clearest in those who do good with no expectation of public recognition. That nurse who quietly saves countless lives across a career, or the teacher who shapes generations of children with patience and love, might rank among humanity's unspoken heroes. More importantly, the heroic call can shift over a lifespan. When you are 20, your impetus might be academic excellence or travel-based discovery. In your 30s or 40s, the impetus might become raising children or steering a company ethically. Later still, you might devote yourself to mentoring younger folks, passing on hard-won knowledge. Each shift resonates with the notion of thorough living, a refusal to remain stuck in an earlier chapter of life, even if that chapter was once fulfilling. By embracing changing calls, individuals continue to evolve, reaffirming that life is dynamic rather than static. It's also worth emphasizing the role of rest and reflection within such a trajectory. Achieving clarity on one's path requires intervals of contemplation and recovery. Even the busiest lives benefit from seasons of reduced commitments, time in nature, meditation, or immersion in the arts. These intervals replenish emotional and intellectual reserves, warding off burnout. They also create space for new insights to surface, insights that might alter or refine one's path. Thus, paradoxically, stepping away from productivity for deliberate intervals can enhance overall productivity and creativity when we return to our work or social obligations. Finally, we see how the puzzle pieces coalesce, forging meaning in the face of mortality, balancing ambition with truth-telling, shouldering responsibility without devolving into tyranny, and weaving personal talent into communal benefit. The underlying harmony across these ideas underscores a timeless pattern. We aim upward, guided by the luminous examples of those we admire, while staying ever mindful of our pitfalls and illusions. If we can maintain that balance, then we partake in a living philosophy, one that evolves alongside us and undergirds our pursuits with a sense of abiding purpose. In closing, the conversation returns to the human capacity for innovation and adaptability, pointing out that there has long been a debate between doomsayers and optimists over the state of the world. While acknowledging formidable challenges, environmental degradation, economic inequality, political unrest, the speakers suggest that consistent historical data also demonstrates astonishing human resourcefulness. Life expectancy has risen over centuries, global poverty rates have diminished significantly in many regions, and technological progress continues to open new frontiers in medicine, communication, and problem-solving. Part of this progress emerges from countless individual visionaries who found unique ways to climb their personal hierarchies, thereby inventing solutions or forging institutions that improved the human condition. Another portion arises from collaborative networks like scientific communities, where truth-seeking thrives on open criticism and shared data. The synergy of personal ambition and collective structures has repeatedly demonstrated that we are capable of far more than a cursory glance at our faults might suggest. Thus, the script's emphasis on living wholeheartedly, acknowledging suffering, and acting with deliberate vision is not a call to naive positivity. It is instead a double-edged realism, Recognizing both the depths of despair and the heights of creative power in humanity's story, we can choose bitterness, chaos, and cruelty, just as we can choose resilience, collaboration, and benevolence. And in the final assessment, the direction we move hinges significantly on whether we define robust purposes for ourselves, remain true to them, and seek out constructive alliances rather than destructive conflicts. One might question, but what if I fail? What if all these visions amount to nothing and tragedy still befalls me? The humbling yet freeing response is that we cannot guarantee outcomes. We can only refine our methods and align them with the best moral wisdom available. The honest pursuit itself imbues life with value. Even if the final results fall short of our ideals, the process can shape us and those around us in ways that might prove redemptive. This stance reframes failure from an absolute condemnation into a learning curve, signifying that each step in the wrong direction, if recognized, can pivot us back toward a more promising route. Ultimately, by staying alert to our mortal limits yet daring to push forward in pursuit of the good, we protect ourselves from the stultifying fear of death. Our energies funnel into an ongoing dance with existence, one step shaped by personal talents, the next guided by communal needs, and all anchored by a moral sense that we, as individuals, shape both our own destinies and the collective human endeavor. In that holistic pursuit, the fear of death no longer paralyzes, it clarifies our priorities and reminds us that every single day counts. To conclude this extended reflection, we circle back to the central lessons and how they might manifest in day-to-day life. Embrace your finite existence. Understand that fear of death often diminishes when life is deeply and thoroughly lived. Instead of denying mortality, use it as a reminder that each moment holds potential for growth, connection, and love. Beware of becoming a parody of yourself. Whether famous or unknown, we risk self-caricature if we surround ourselves only with echoes of our own perspectives. Seek honest, critical voices to remain genuine and open. Cultivate strong reasons to act. Having a structured vision or meaningful aim, like the Future Authoring Project, provides emotional resilience. Challenges become stepping stones, and progress elicits positive motivation. Acknowledge the interplay of virtues and discipline. Truth-telling, courage, reliability, creativity, and compassion build a character capable of navigating life's volatility. Consistent practice of good habits, even in small ways, coalesces into genuine heroism. Respect your limits and others' autonomy. Goals should stretch, but not break you. Individual differences call for different pacing, tasks, or social roles. Sustain a balanced approach that fosters personal growth without sacrificing mental health. Envision both heaven and hell. Contemplating the best you can achieve incentivizes you, while knowing your potential for wrongdoing keeps you vigilant against destructive impulses. Both images provide clarity and moral urgency. Strive to lead, not dominate. If you spot a dragon, a societal or personal threat, aim to address it with principled determination and humility. Avoid devolving into tyranny born from fear or unchecked anger. Interweave personal improvement with communal service. The synergy between self-betterment and contributing to others can protect against cynicism and nihilism, fueling a profound sense of purpose. Foster open communication. Whether in families, workplaces, or communities, transparency and dialogue prevent misunderstandings and encourage ethical collaboration. This dynamic maintains a delicate but essential social balance. Renew continuously. Periods of rest, reflection, and recalibration ensure that life's journey remains sustainable. Each new chapter may redefine your vision, forging a living, adaptive philosophy rather than a static creed. If there is a unifying thread throughout all these themes, it is the assurance that human life, while shadowed by impermanence and error, harbors immense capacity for renewal, invention, and moral progress. The conversation spans topics from mortality and fear to the heights of collaborative problem-solving, anchored by the premise that meaning arises from purposeful engagement. Whether contending with personal hardship or global-scale dangers, the fundamental call remains the same: adopt a stance of responsible creativity, tempered by humility, driven by hope. In doing so, you not only face the fear of death more squarely, but also, day by day, partake in the ongoing act of shaping a world worth living in. As our journey comes to an end, remember this: the story you tell yourself shapes the life you'll live. From facing the shadow of mortality to embracing authentic vulnerability, every moment offers you a chance to redefine who you are. It's not about perfection, it's about courage, choosing to move forward even when it's easier to retreat. I believe there's real power in knowing you're not alone. We've all felt the same fears, stumbled in similar ways, and wondered if we're truly enough. But the truth is, you're stronger and braver than you've ever imagined. Now, I'd love to hear your story. Comment below, share your insights, struggles, or triumphs. Let's inspire each other to keep chasing that extraordinary life. Together, we're unstoppable.